recently we had somebody that had 13 years of US postal experience apply for a business development manager role for a global mining company. It was a difficult decision. And when you're in agency, you tend to ride economic waves, and it's a feast or famine mentality. I gave it up in order for stability.
Hi, all. Good morning. So today I have Zach with us, who is all about global recruitment, excellence in mining, and mineral exploration. He has that experience recruiting for people in this specific niche, and he's learned a lot along the way. Let's welcome Zach on 10 Minutes of Hiring Wisdom, where he will tell us about what he's learned along the way, what it's like recruiting for very niche talent, and if he has any tips for job seekers out there. Hi, Zach. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
So, Zach, just wanted to let's dig deep and just want to ask, why specific recruitment in such a niche industry? It's very hard to find people that specifically have these skills. So how has your experience been so far?
So I actually owned my own private recruitment firm for about 17 years prior to joining KoBold. And we in private industry generally tend to specialize in a niche. General placement firms tend to have to carry a lot of overhead and a lot of staff, whereas niche firms are much more able to be nimble and smaller staffs that specialize in high priority talent within their niche.
Okay, that's very smart. So you mentioned that they tend to have a lot of overhead costs. Because you were in the agency space for a while, why did you decide to leave your agency 17 years later and join a company of its own?
KoBold was one of my best clients prior to joining. It's an industry that I am deeply passionate about. I love the mining industry. I also have a specialty in accounting and finance, coincidentally.
Okay.
However, KoBold was forcing an industry to change that has not been forced to change in a very long time. Mineral exploration has been done virtually the same way it's been done for over 100 years. That being said, KoBold was trying to change the face of the way that exploration is conducted, and it was something that I wanted to be a part of. So I gave up unlimited earning potential and owning my own business to come and work for KoBold, and I can honestly say it was the best choice I ever made. I get to go after the best and brightest on the market every single day on a global scale.
Okay, two follow-up questions. So you did touch upon how you had to give up your unlimited earning potential, but I think how was the transition like? Because I think a lot of humans, as humans, we're scared of change, and the first step that you take towards something is the hardest step. So how did you ensure that you were ready to let go of 17 years of your own business and join a company that was essentially your best client? But how did you make sure that the smooth was very transition where you were like, oh my God, I should not have done that?
That's a tough one. It was an internal struggle. The company that I owned it with my parents, actually. Both of my parents are headhunters as well. So turns out that when both of your folks do the same thing, you're pretty predisposed to being decent at the job. It was a difficult decision. And when you're in agency, you tend to ride economic waves, and it's a feast or famine mentality. I gave it up in order for stability. And as I said before, it really was this internal struggle that, do I give up my own company in order to work for somebody else? And ultimately, I made the decision, and I haven't looked back since. Do I miss getting big commission checks? Yes, absolutely. But I believe that stability and working for a groundbreaking company more than makes up for that.
Okay. Okay. Another important thing that you touched on, you were working with your parents. So I think generationally, when you work with your family business, it's very hard to break away from it. So how was like your experience like breaking away from a family business? How did your parents receive that? How was the experience for yourself? A lot, of course, you mentioned there was internal struggle, but can you maybe touch upon that?
Sure, absolutely. So my parents want what's best for me, as I feel that most parents do, the world around. Part of what I love about working in a global space is that you find that people are the same the world around. They want to do right by their families. They want to better themselves. Um, and that's what I truly love and why I love working with diverse talent in multiple different locations. My parents ultimately told me to make the decision that was right for myself and my family, my wife and child. Um, that being said, they also knew that I was the top earner, and I was effectively shuttering our family business. Working with family is tough. It's very hard, especially for the parents, to separate work and personal. For you to be seen as an employee or as a co-owner as opposed to a son or daughter. And those struggles and strifes come into play every single day, especially when making major business decisions. Um, Ultimately, though, both of my parents were of retirement age. They were ready to step away, and I had the choice of either building up and rebuilding the company that they had built for, shoot, Rocky Mountain Recruiters was in business for since 1969,
Wow.
oldest search firm in Denver. And I chose to join a company knowing that I had that shingle always laid, so that I can better myself. And if I ever needed to, I can always go back into private placement.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. I think you captured the sense of how hard it is to make the boundaries between being an employee but also being their child, which is something a lot of parents specifically struggle with because essentially you're always going to be their child, and them to look at you as their employee is always very hard. So thank you for sharing that, Zach. So Zach, let's get down into your expertise in recruitment. You've been in the niche space for quite a while, so you're seeing a lot of companies are laying off people. What is some piece of advice that you might have for people who are struggling to find a job, especially because every day you see some companies laying off people? What would be some words of wisdom?
My biggest word of wisdom is don't get fancy on your resume. Make it clear and concise, give scale, and describe the company more so than the position. If we use, let's say, an HR manager as an example, everybody knows what an HR manager does, but the size of the company that you work for, what the company does, and the scale and scope of your position is far more important than listing managed HRIS system. So that's one major one. The second thing where I find that most people get frustrated with their job search is they are applying for positions that they are wildly unqualified for. Another good example, recently we had somebody that had 13 years of US postal experience apply for a business development manager role for a global mining company. Clearly you're not qualified for that position. Therefore, don't apply for it. It's just when you do, you're destined to get a rejection email. It's best to keep an eye on the job boards, make sure that you're applying for a position that you are well qualified for and that you're not grasping for straws within that post. You may know what NLP is, but if you don't have ample experience in it and this job requires 10 years of NLP experience, your 1 year is not going to cut it. There's no point in throwing a Hail Mary pass up to just to see if maybe it lands.
Okay. So I think there's a lot of people who say that you should always take your chances. You mentioned something that if you're not qualified for a job, do not. So you know how there's always a gray line area where you might have 3 to 4 years of experience and the job requires 6 years of experience. So how do you mitigate that line to ensure that okay, you don't give up a good opportunity that you might be selected for? How does that work?
I would say that over 90% of the time, if you don't meet the minimum years of experience that's required, um, companies put those minimum years of experience on there because you, at that point, you know what the job is very well. Sure, you can try it, but again, to cut down on your own frustration and to cut down on those system generated uh, rejection emails that everybody gets and nobody likes, it's really best to make sure that you look, or you can try reaching out to the hiring manager and whether it be via LinkedIn or another media, and letting them know, hey, I have 3 to 4 years experience. This post requires 6. However, is there any way that I might be in consideration? And that'll be a good bellwether. If they get back to you and say, yes, we'd like to see your resume regardless, great, you've got a foot in the door. If they are hard fast at that 6 years of experience, they will either not respond or they will just straight tell you so. Um, More often than not, we see candidates grasping. You know, it's that old adage that everybody wants 5 years of experience, but nobody wants to give you the 5 years of experience. I guarantee you that those junior positions do come up, and you just have to be very quick to jump on them when they do. So bookmark job sites, bookmark career pages for companies that you're interested in. Try making inroads within those companies. I mean, work your social media, work LinkedIn, and be proactive. Just submitting an application is not the way to go about finding a job. It's akin to throwing your resume out of an airplane and hoping it lands on the right doorstep as opposed to actually knocking on the door.
Okay, no, thank you for that analogy. That was a really good one. Last question, Zach, which would be, I know you're always hiring for a lot of good roles, so can you maybe specify some of the positions you might be actively recruiting for, so if people are looking, they know what to apply for?
Yes, absolutely. So KoBold is an interesting company. We are threading the needle between being a technology forward company and a mining exploration company, a mineral exploration company. Um, we have a broad scope and staff. So therefore, we are hiring for everything from front-end software developer to natural language processing developers and to data science, entry-level data science. We also have open. It's our associate data science position. And conversely, on the opposite side, on our operations and geological side, we're always looking for qualified geologists. We're also looking for geophysicists, geochemists. That is just a brief summary of what we're looking for. We have over 40 positions open globally. But one other little plug is that I will add that when you're looking at a job description, make sure you read all the way through it, because generally there will be a location listed on the bottom. If it says remote first or candidate must be located in Zambia, if you're applying from Montreal, chances are you're not going to get the Zambian position. However, it never hurts to, again, reach out and tell us more about yourself and why you think you're qualified.
Okay, well, you heard it from Zach, guys. If you guys are considering and interested in a technological company as well as a mining exploration company, you know who to reach out to or which company to look for. Zach, thank you so much for coming on the show, for sharing your experiences, how you dived deep and left your own company to work with a company who was your biggest client, how you branched away from your family business, and here you are working for a company that you're very passionate about, but also you never doubted the choice that you made, which is very inspiring. Thank you so much for coming on the show and for sharing your insights.
My pleasure.